At 3 a.m. on the planet Verlan, the Earth Embassy erupted in flame. The sons of the old empire had made their move. Inside, smoke choked the corridors. Ambassador Sandra Okonkwo and her staff were trapped, the fire spreading faster than any evacuation plan.
Send the help, not the army.
The coded message vanished into the chaos, riding a narrowband burst that cut through the jamming. Just 6 words. From a safe distance, the sons watched the fire consume the diplomatic compound, certain they had provoked Earth into a military response.
They want us to call for warships. They think that will justify their hatred.
But Earth's high readiness protocol for a firebombed embassy had been written by people who understood that some fires could not be put out with guns. The reply was already in motion. Not a fleet. Something that took less than 2 hours to scramble. The sons celebrated, their message boards lighting up with boasts of the coming war they would rally against. They celebrated because they did not yet know what was falling through the upper atmosphere toward them. 4,000 light-years away, in rural Kansas, a fire pager screamed at 3:17 a.m.
This code, this ain't no barn fire.
Mark pulled on his turnout gear, then painted the skull across his lower face. An old ritual, a promise.
Listen up. This ain't a drill. We got a burnin' embassy on Verlan, and they're asking for us.
We ain't soldiers. We're just volunteers. What can we do?
What we always do, put water on fire and pull people out.
43 years of this. Never thought I'd be going to space for it.
By 4 a.m., 40 volunteers waited by their rigs. No weapons. Just hoses, axes, and a stubborn unwillingness to let people burn. They boarded the drop pods without ceremony, each pod stamped with a single word: rescue. The pods launched on a column of blue fire, punching through the Kansas sky. 2 hours to Verlan. The drop pods slammed into the Verlan surface, their heat shields glowing. Hatches blew open, and figures in heavy coats spilled out. A Verlan security cordon blocked their path. An officer raised a glowing baton, shouting for them to halt and await authorization.
We don't have time for your paperwork. That building's coming down.
Chief, they ain't gonna just let us.
They don't have to let us. Move.
The firefighters surged past the stunned guards. No weapons drawn, no threats made, just civilians walking into an inferno.
Never thought I'd walk past an armed checkpoint without a gun and be the most dangerous thing in the room.
Inside the embassy lobby, a collapsing maze of smoke and shattered glass. Mark's flashlight cut a thin beam through the darkness.
Fire department, call out if you can hear me.
Above them, the ceiling groaned like a dying beast. The fire was far from contained. The team fanned out through the heat. A weak cry from behind a collapsed door gave them direction.
Mark, in here. I found the ambassador. She's alive.
You came. I asked for help, but I didn't know if they'd listen.
Within 10 minutes, the last human staffer was carried clear. 41 souls pulled from the blaze.
That building next door, it's the Sun's headquarters. And it's on fire too.
You are not seriously going in there. That's the people who did this.
Fire don't care who started it. Someone might be trapped in there.
He keyed his radio. Chief, I need a crew for the adjacent structure. Gonna search it. A pause, then Henderson's voice. Copy. Go.
I just hope I'm not walking into a trap as well as a fire.
The doorframe bore the sun's crest, a gold glinting fist. It was already warping in the heat. Mark pushed through. Inside, the burning symbols of the suns made the air taste of copper. Mark's beam found an alien civilian half buried under rubble, eyes wide with fear.
Easy now. We're gonna get you out.
The alien flinched, a translator crackling brokenly. Humans, you come to finish us?
Number. We came because the building's on fire. Let us help.
The alien's gaze shifted between them, disbelief warring with hope. Then, a shaky nod. Together, they pulled him free. Deeper in, a second survivor, a Verlan in scorched gold-trimmed robes, shouted at them to stay back.
You are gonna die in here if you don't move.
The Verlan spat. Better to burn than be saved by Earth's weakness. But Emily stepped forward anyway.
I don't care what you think of us. You are not dying on my watch.
Then, through the crackle of flames, they heard a chorus of weaker cries from behind a collapsed wall. More people, trapped deeper. Mark followed the cries through smoldering corridors until his light caught gold-trimmed robes under a fallen beam.
The ones who lit the match.
The alien was still breathing. Mark didn't need to know his name to know he'd carry him.
Got one. Gonna need a path cleared, now.
No response but static. The building's bones were failing. Mark crouched, hooked his arms under the alien, and lifted in one fluid motion. The ceiling shrieked. Dust poured from splintering joists. Mark moved.
Don't think. Just walk.
A pillar crashed behind him, then a wall. The shockwave threw debris across his back. He kept his feet. He burst through the outer doors into the Verlin night, just as the entire wing folded in on itself with a roar. For a moment he just stood there, breath heaving, the weight of the enemy on his shoulder, feeling no different than any other life. Alien medics rushed forward. Mark lowered the unconscious Verlin onto their stretcher without ceremony. He didn't wait for thanks. He just turned and walked back toward the fire, his silhouette swallowed by the smoke. Above, a news drone's rotors beat a frantic rhythm. It had been filming since the fire started. The drone captured the image. A soot-streaked human, skull-faced beneath his pushed-up mask, carrying an enemy arsonist like a fallen friend. By the time the sun broke over Verlan's capital, the clip was everywhere. Holo screens in public squares replayed it on loop. Aliens who had never seen a volunteer firefighter gathered, confused and silent. A child's voice cut through the crowd. "Mama, why does that human wear such a face?" No one had an answer. The footage played again. Mark's calm, exhausted eyes as he handed over the arsonist. He never saw the drone. He never intended to make a statement. He just went back into the fire. Behind him, the clip continued to spread, reaching millions who had never heard the word firefighter.
This is the image that is shaking Verlan. A human, unarmed, carrying a son of the old empire from the flames.
From a hidden bunker, the Sun's leadership broadcast a countermessage. This is Earth's weakness. They send unarmored fools to die. But the image of the human firefighter repeated across every screen, and it told a different story.
The crucial question remains: why would Earth send civilians to save their own attackers?
The question hung in the air like smoke. Across Verlan, social feeds ignited with fierce debate. Then more rescue footage appeared. A second firefighter emerging with another arsonist, then a third. The Sun's propaganda withered. How could they claim Earth was weak when their own ranks were being pulled from the fire?
We confirm now that over 80 Verlan civilians have been rescued by these human volunteers, including the very individuals who ignited the embassy.
In the public squares, angry shouts gave way to hushed conversations. For centuries, strength had been measured in weapons. The humans were rewriting the equation with every life they carried out. In a crowded medical bay, Zorak opened his eyes to pale lights and the hum of monitors. The last thing he remembered was fire.
Why am I alive?
A medic pointed to a wall screen. A human carried you out. You have been unconscious for hours.
Show me.
This is the moment a human volunteer firefighter, unarmed, carried a known arsonist from the flames.
The feed zoomed in. A soot-streaked human in a yellow helmet, skull paint on his face, lifting Zorak's limp body as if it weighed nothing.
No soldier. No conscript. He had no reason to save me.
Then the reporter asked the question that was tearing Verlan apart. What kind of species sends its ordinary citizens to die for strangers?
I burned their embassy. I would have let them die. And they still came.
He stared at the image of his own body in the human's arms and said nothing. There were no words for what he was feeling. The morning news cycle turned to a single question. Who were these humans?
We have accessed Earth's archives. These are not soldiers. They are volunteers.
Footage of Mark Kern at his electrician job dissolved into the now iconic image of him in turnout gear and skull paint.
They are unpaid civilians, no conscription. A tradition older than Earth's spaceflight.
No other species in the known galaxy had anything like it. firefighting elsewhere was either paid or a military branch. Across Verlan, commentators asked, what would it take for one of us to do this? The silence that followed was an answer. Nothing in Verlan culture could produce such a choice.
The Suns called this weakness. But this image speaks louder than any weapon.
Holo screens in every district showed the skull-faced human. A new symbol had taken root. The Suns' war cries, once thunder, now echoed as hollow noise. Ignoring the protests of medics, Zorak limped from the triage tent toward the still smoldering embassy. The human firefighters were still there, dragging hoses over glowing embers, their yellow helmets visible through the haze. He found the one called Mark leaning against a collapsed wall, tilting a canteen into his mouth, the skull paint smeared but still fierce. When Mark glanced up, there was no flicker of recognition, just the exhausted gaze of a man who had pulled too many bodies to count.
You carried me out.
Mark lowered the canteen, looked at the Verlan's scorched robes, and gave the smallest shrug. Then he jerked a thumb toward the hose line. His crew was repositioning and pushed off the wall without a word. Zorak stood motionless as the human walked back into the wreckage, the number 47 on his helmet disappearing into the smoke.
He didn't ask who I was. He just went back.
No gratitude had been demanded, no apology heard, only a silent expectation that there was still work to do. A dull thud echoed beneath the compound. A secondary explosion sent a fresh column of oily smoke rising from the Sun's building.
Radio says there are still people trapped. Basement level. They can't get out.
We don't have the crew. Half our team is already on the other side.
I can guide you. I know every room, every stairwell. I helped build this place.
You burned our embassy. Now you want to lead us in?
Mark looked at the Verlan for a long moment, not at the robes, but at the eyes that had seen the same fire he had. Then he pulled a spare breathing mask from his pack and held it out.
You slow me down. I am leaving you behind.
Zorak donned the mask without a word and turned toward the raging fire, his former comrade's prison. The arsonist led the firefighters into the burning dark, and somewhere in the wreckage, other lives still beat. The stairwell buckled as they descended. Beyond a smoke-choked door, desperate cries echoed. Mark's light found gold-trimmed robes. 3 Suns, trapped. One brandished a plasma pistol, hand trembling.
Lower the weapon. They came to save us, not execute.
The gunman's eyes locked on Zorak's mask, disbelief warring with hope. He asked how this was possible.
This human carried me out. Look at him. He bleeds for us, and we tried to kill him.
The pistol wavered. No one spoke. Mark simply waited, his skull-painted face steady, breath rasping through the mask. Something cracked in the arsonist's expression. The weapon clattered to the floor. Without a word, Mark and Zorak pulled the men free. The last of the arsonists stumbled into the night, and the sons of the old empire, born in hatred, died in the same fire they had set. By dawn, the fire was declared under control. The last hose bled dry. Firefighters collapsed where they stood. Mark sat on a chunk of charred stone, helmet off, skull paint a ruin of sweat and soot. He stared at the dying embers. Medics circulated oxygen masks, but most of the volunteers waved them off. They just sat and watched the sunrise. Ambassador Sandra, arm in a sling, bandages on her forehead, stepped before a gathering of Verlan media who had descended on the scene.
Earth's strength has never been in our weapons. It is in our willingness to save anyone, even those who would destroy us.
Simultaneously, the Verlan Senate convened an emergency session and broadcast a formal declaration. Earth had demonstrated a profound and unexpected protection. No demands were made, no territory claimed. Only gratitude, expressed in the formal language of a planet that had never before thanked its enemy.
We asked for help, not an army. And what arrived were people who risked everything for strangers.
Her voice broke slightly. That is the human way. Public opinion polls from Verlan news agencies showed the sons of the old empire losing all support. Within hours, the extremist party, had fewer than a dozen members remaining. 1 month after the fire, the remnants of the Sons of the Old Empire formally dissolved.
I was an arsonist. A human carried me out. I will never touch a weapon again.
His voice cracked, but it echoed across the planet.
We have witnessed Earth's answer to hatred. It was not a warship. It was a volunteer with a hose. I propose we build our own fire service and name it after the number on that human's helmet, the Mark Resolution.
The Senate chamber fell silent, then erupted in debate. Across Verlan, citizens gathered around screens, watching their leaders argue whether a human tradition could become theirs.
He saved me with no name. Now, his name will be law.
The Mark Resolution did not pass that day, but it was introduced, and that act alone was a revolution. For the first time, the Senate debated a bill inspired by a single act of unarmed rescue. Months after returning to Earth, Mark Kern was bent over a faulty wiring panel in the fire station garage, his hands steady and careful. A sleek diplomatic courier vehicle pulled up outside, bearing the Verlan insignia. A Verlan official stepped out holding a formal tablet. Mark wiped his hands on a rag and walked over. The message on the tablet read, "The Mark Resolution has passed. We request your presence to train the 1st Verlan Volunteer Fire Unit."
They want me to teach them. Well, I suppose the tanker truck could use a long trip.
He didn't ask for pay. He just asked when they needed him. By the end of the day, he had packed his turnout gear, the battered yellow helmet with the hand-painted 47, and a small kit of tools.
Ain't every day an electrician gets to make history.
He made a call to his chief, telling him he'd be off-world for a while. Henderson just grunted approval. The next transport left in 3 days. Mark was on it. In the Verlan Senate, the final vote was taken. No debate, no abstentions, just a unanimous, silent affirmation.
The Mark Resolution passes. Verlan shall establish a volunteer fire service, modeled on the selflessness we witnessed.
Then she did what no one had expected. She called a name. The doors opened, and Zorak stepped into the light, wearing a simple gray uniform, with no gold, no weapons. He had not armed himself since the fire. The hands that once held accelerant now clasped nothing.
I once burned houses. Now I will save them.
He was appointed chief of the Verlan Volunteer Fire Service. There was no dissent. News of the appointment spread across Verlan with stunning speed. The arsonist who was saved would now lead the saviors, and somewhere in that crowd, unseen by cameras, Mark Kern stepped off a transport. He walked toward the new training facility, where the fire chief waited. Once his enemy, now his student. The training yard smelled of fresh concrete and the alien equivalent of diesel. Mark and Zorak stood face to face.
First thing, the hose ain't a weapon. It's a lifeline. Treat it that way.
Zorak fumbled the nozzle, his scarred hands still learning the weight. Mark stepped in without a word and repositioned his grip.
Every mistake reminds me of what I was, but he never uses that against me.
Good. Do it again.
Weeks blurred into a rhythm of drill and exhaustion. Zorak led a team into a smoke-filled training building, and for the first time, every step was right. Then a call came in. A real fire. A residential block. Kitchen blaze. No one trapped but spreading fast. The all-Verlan crew deployed the hose and advanced. Zorak's voice cut through the smoke. Calm and clear. The fire died. Neighbors who had fled now crept back, staring at the gray uniformed figures. Then someone started clapping. Mark stood a block away, unseen. He allowed himself a small, quiet smile, then turned back toward the training yard. The new Earth Embassy rose from the same ground that had once burned. Attached to it, a fire station, its bay doors open, a red engine waiting.
Today we dedicate not just a building, but a principle, that saving lives is the truest show of force.
Beside the podium, Mark and Zorak stood together. Mark with his battered yellow helmet tucked under his arm. Zorak in a simple chief's uniform. Between them, a covered plaque waited. Sandra gestured, and the cloth fell away. The words were simple, In both English and Verlan, house was on fire. Wasn't time to ask whose. The crowd stirred, humans and Verlans alike, as the weight of those words settled.
That's all it ever was. Just a house on fire.
Then the embassy's fire siren sounded once, a brief ceremonial wail, and the new crew stood at attention.
We are open.
And that was the legacy of a night when a firebomb was answered, not with retaliation, but with a hose. Years later, on a quiet Kansas evening, Mark Kearns sat on his porch watching the sun dip toward the wheat fields. A young Verlan journalist settled across from him. She had traveled light years for a single question. She asked, "Why did you save the people who tried to kill you?" Mark was quiet for a long moment. His weathered hands rested on the arms of the old chair.
House was on fire. Wasn't time to ask whose.
The journalist's pen hovered, motionless. She saw, for the first time, the simplicity of it. Mark looked away toward the darkening sky. There was nothing else to say. She closed her notebook. The interview was finished. He hadn't given her a speech. He had given her the unvarnished reason, and the porch fell silent again, save for the distant cry of a night bird and the whisper of the wind through the wheat. The camera slowly pulled back from the porch, rising over the wheat fields that stretched to the horizon. In the distance, the lights of a small town glimmered, and at its edge, a fire station. A fire engine rolled out, its red lights slicing the dark, crewed by human and Verlan volunteers. They were not racing to a blaze. They were returning from one, another ordinary call handled by ordinary people. One of the Verlan crew members glanced back at the station, where a weathered bronze plaque hung by the door, its inscription, worn by weather, still read, "Mark Resolution Fire Station Number 1. The engine passed out of frame, its siren silent, its work done." The image held on the station under the stars, then slowly began to fade. A caption rose against the darkness. The Mark Resolution inspired a new culture of service, and the wind carried on, over the wheat and across the void, where other worlds now listened. Far below, on a dark Kansas highway, the fire engine's red lights sliced through the night, headed home. In the cab, a human driver lifted a hand from the wheel, and beside him, a Verlan in turnout gear turned and waved toward the camera. A faint chirp of the siren, friendly, almost musical, pierced the quiet, then fell away. The engine curved around a gentle bend and disappeared behind a dark line of trees. The camera held on the empty road as the last of its sound evaporated. Then the frame began to darken, the edges softening into black. When the black was complete, a single line of white resolved against the void. They set an embassy on fire. Earth's volunteer firefighters saved them all. The words remained a moment, then slowly faded into silence. End.